Going digital is absolutely an imperative. There is no more a question about it. So the burning platform is here today. And that's great news because a lot of companies have been taking it a bit easy because we've had 10 great years behind us. But the time ahead is not going to be the same. So better, faster, cheaper, and of course, thereby happier shareholders, happier customers, and happier employees. But the minute you want to get the benefits of agility across your organization, you need that commitment to making the hard decisions, the commitment to making the organizational changes, and the commitment to supporting it through actions of the senior leadership team. Not through words, through actual behavioral actions. Making sure that the right leaders are available to do this is important as well. So who are these right leaders? So just because somebody has time on their hands, you don't appoint them as the head of transformation. That is just definitely a recipe for disaster. So I use a calculation called org BMI. It's a formula that calculates the amount of fat in an organization. Unnecessary overhead. Overhead is absolutely necessary, but how much of it? And the percentages I've worked out, and we've done this for over hundreds of thousands of people in IBM and in other companies all over the world, from small companies to big ones, is somewhere between 8 to 12% is a good BMI. But most of the large corporations I work with, when they start their org structure, looking at it, start their redesigns, etc., they're sitting somewhere between 30 and 40%, because there is nothing that drives behavior more than the budgeting and funding model in an organization. It's the way finance have developed a control mechanism on the rest of the organization. But if the budgeting model becomes dysfunctional, you get this dysfunctional behavior, this rush every year to grab budget and to build your empire, to protect your domain, and to say that you need 50 projects because you know they're going to cut it by 20% or 30%. So you've already built that fight. These sort of bad behaviors have to be addressed. And that funding model has to be addressed. You cannot have transformation be done to somebody. They have to own it. Now that means identifying the leaders and the champions within the organization that are going to own this transformation. The transformation team only provides support. I've had so many cases where senior leadership appoint a transformation manager and make this person responsible for the success of the transformation. And guess what? It's a recipe for disaster. They're doomed to fail from day one. Because these people who are the ones that should be transformed have no incentive to transform. Collaboration is more effective at the top of the organization or at the bottom of the organization. This is how people work together with each other. And I'm sure all of you would have experienced what I've experienced working for and in large corporations. It is much lower at the top than at the bottom. The challenge is getting the top executive team, including the board, to actually collaborate and have a shared way of doing things. And for that, you need leaders. Somebody can't come in. You can't hire a consultant to do that for you. That has to be led internally by the informal leaders and the great influencers within the company. So 3 main challenges. The first one is commitment in actions of the senior-most leadership team. This has been the downfall of many a program that I've seen, whereby they give it lip service and I look like an owl, but I'm not really an owl. I'm a pussycat in disguise like an owl. I'm agile, but I'm not really agile, so on and so forth. So commitment is the first one. The next 2 is picking the right person to lead the change. Who's this person going to be? As I said, availability is not a skill. Finding that person to lead the transformation team is vital. Normally getting an outside consultant can help for a very short time to set it up, but to actually lead it, you need somebody internal. And the next one is, who are the informal leaders within the company who are going to be take ownership, champion this change, and run with it, the early adopters. And that brings us to the vital role of O&A and how O&A, or organizational network analysis, helps to inform and find these leaders within the organization. In my experience, 80% of the Agile transformation programs that have not been successful have been due to the lack of the right leaders in the right place.
Everyone understands how work requires a formal hierarchy. It's exactly how work is assigned, it's how work is organized. However, I think everyone here has probably experienced how work actually gets done. Work is accomplished by going to the necessary people you need for the information, get their attention, influence them into the types of decisions that you want to make. Now, there are two types of O&A analyses. One is called active and one is called passive. In the active side of the house, it's really surveys and questionnaires, right? Everything's self-reported, and the advantages of this is that it can be a point in time or a snapshot, and that from these surveys, you can really hone in on asking certain questions, which can give you context about the relationships, the causality, just better understanding of that organization. Now, on the passive side, you're really looking at what's called employee metadata, all the emails, the IMs, wearables, if you have any, so Slack, Office, calendar invites, all that type of data can be aggregated and put into a packaged, the technology of the platform that can then read those different relationships. Now, what's great about passive is it scales really quickly and you have continuous monitoring, not just a snapshot. With this, however, there comes a little bit of an issue around privacy concerns, which again, for the most part, you can be very careful with how you run these exercises and eliminate as much privacy concern as possible. You tell employees that you're going to conduct a study or an exercise. So now all of a sudden they know what kind of study you're using it for, what outcomes, what actions would be taken afterward, right? Because that's, again, theoretically the best way to get people comfortable with with an exercise like this. But once people know that, is there an aspect or a bias that occurs after that? Is there a concern that if people know what potential outcomes there could be, that they're displaying biases, or is kind of the rule of large numbers something that could potentially override that?
It's important to clarify that as far as you're dealing with people, you're dealing with biased information. When you have feedback from your immediate supervisor, that feedback is biased. When you do a 180 or 360 exercise, you're picking the people that are going to give you feedback, right? That system is biased as well. Here you're asking people to identify the people that they are interacting with on a regular basis. So that's going to be a bias assessment, but because you have such a high number of data points in the analysis, that overrides that bias. If you are able to position only 3% of the informal leaders in the organization as early adopters, and you can basically enable them to spread the adoption of this change, only that 3% of informal leaders can influence up to 85% of the remaining population. You can see that the tool shows us in a very interactive manner how these people can influence the rest of the organization and drag them in a certain direction. If you select these early adopters based on the number of years of experience that they have, based on the fact that they know the process or not, but this person that you select turns out to be this peripheral employee, it doesn't matter how hard you try. It doesn't matter how hard you try, they cannot influence the rest of the organization. Yeah, and by the way, just to give credit where credit is due, the insight on the 3% influence and 85% comes from Innovisor, a company based in Denmark. We at CTS have discovered actually that you can accelerate by 40% the implementation of any strategy change by leveraging those informal leaders as early adopters. When I apply this AI-powered algorithm to automatically identify the organizational silos in the organization, the tool indicates that we have a total of 6 informal communities. Now, when you will select those informal leaders, you want to make sure that you have representation from each and every of these informal communities, because otherwise, the informal leader that you select might be useful to influence this one and this one, but for this one will not have any effect. And the analysis will show as well, if you have organizational silos, if you have people that are acting as bottlenecks or as a bridge, and you can use these insights for organizational design as well. But in the end, it all comes down to who is the person that is going to sell to you that new way of working.